nobody there. It seems I'm all alone again. Does anybody care? This planet's empty. I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Monday, June 26, 2023. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards and across the country. You can also join us at the end of the week for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast at Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And you can support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress for all the details. And look, you want to help out the show right now? Get on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on, and leave a comment to let other folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show. For more PA Progressive Talk, tune to the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, or Facebook, and subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Check out thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you've got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast at Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you haven't heard, The Signal is a new podcast by the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. Ooh, gotta like that. Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on the right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so that we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive roots. Check them out directly at thebuckscountybeacon.podbean.com or pick up the podcast The Signal wherever you get your podcast. For all you gamers out there, the Game-In, that's with 2 N's, the Game-In is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show. They've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. Yes, and there's a great place all around, so go check them out. Check out their Facebook page. Follow them on Twitter at The Game-In, that's with 2 N's. Got a question about a game, looking for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongofDayman, 2 N's at SongofDayman on Twitter. And look, folks, we can't let Paul Martino, Moms for Liberty, and their oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Levelfield to launch a truly community-rooted PAC to invest in organizing, supporting local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmasking the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You get more information and drop your donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. Well, on today's show, I welcome Chris Ullery back to the show. Chris covers extremism and social justice for the USA Today network of Pennsylvania and for the Bucks County Courier Times. We'll be talking about his new investigative piece, Emails Show How Religious Liberties Law Firm Has Influenced Bucks and York Schools. This article is part of an ongoing investigation by Chris and investigative journalist Bethany Rogers from the USA Today Network's PA Capitol Bureau. Their investigations have helped expose how a deep-pocketed religious law firm is working with right-wing school boards across Pennsylvania to change policies and sow division. Chris has been a reporter with the Bucks County Courier Times since 2015, covering municipal government, infrastructure, and the Central Bucks School District, which we'll be talking about tonight, ironically, or not so ironically. His mostly self-taught skills in the Python computer programming language have helped him flesh out and analyze years of voter registration data, track COVID-19 cases at the start of the pandemic in 2020, and build a 10-year database of 9/11 call logs in Bucks County. In addition to using his programming experience to track extremist movements, he will work with local newsrooms, the USA Today network, to help tell stories by the numbers. Chris graduated from Frostburg State University in 2014 with a BS in English, major in literature, minor in journalism, near his hometown of Cumberland, Maryland. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, man, it's so great to have you back on the show. And like just so everybody knows, in tonight's show notes, if you want to kind of check in with Chris, there'll be links to this article, links to the previous article, which we had him on talking about. And if you want to follow Chris on Twitter, you can do so at Ullery at Intel. Check out all his great stuff. So, Chris, this is part 2, I guess, of an ongoing series. Well, actually, I mean, if you want to, there's a kind of you had reporting that came out even before the right to know request come out. You've been tracking some of this stuff, that looking at the influence of some of these outside organizations that have had on the Bucks County School District and beyond. We've already got a bunch of folks kind of like in tonight. Hey, Darren. Hey, Jordan. Hey, Marta. Kind of in here to check things out. Got folks from York and kind of Bucks County on here tonight because of the direct impact of your reporting is helping us all understand what's going on. So let's maybe kind of, before we jump into this specific article, maybe you could kind of set the table for us a little bit about kind of where the reporting come. Maybe people didn't catch your first round of reporting, but how did you get to this point that you were kind of looking at all this information and all these emails about what's happening behind the scenes in these school boards?
Well, I guess it officially kind of started in January of this year after I was leaked copies of an administrative regulation for controversial library policy in Central Bucks. That document, the metadata that contains information on like the author and when it was created, led me to identify an attorney with the Independence Law Center, which then we learned after a couple of weeks of trying to get some answers on it, that, you know, it was in fact the regulations they were using. At some point, ILC had been brought in. And then around that same time, we'd heard that Pencrest School District over in Crawford County on the other side of the state had implemented an athletics policy and a library book policy very similar to Central Bucks. And then apparently their solicitor who had advised against passing this policy, he quit. We'd heard that ILC might be coming in, so we put in a right to know request. But Bethany actually suggests we put in a right to know request. And that's where we got a couple of emails that showed one of the board members in Pencrest had reached out to ILC or had some sort of communication going. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we realized that, you know, this group is really sort of operating outside of the public view for the most part. You might find in like Hempfield School District, the board announced that they were going to hire them and work with them on their athletics policy. But, you know, it's really what we found so far was very much after the fact. That's when we learned they were involved. So Bethany and I started to fill out right to know requests. We built sort of a list of school districts where we saw things like Penn America and the American Library Association's list of challenged books throughout the state. We're looking for any type of news about locker rooms or bathrooms in certain school districts. And we sent out right to know requests to, I think it was a little over 30 districts across the state. Probably about a dozen of them had some kind of documentation that came back to us. And that led us to our story in April, where we found, you know, in Bucks County, ILC was involved in drafting numerous policies in Penridge School District in Upper Bucks County. We found more information about in East Lancaster County School District. It was a couple years back, but they were directly involved in this locker room policy, and there were some, you know, reports of they might have even helped sort of move it along behind the scenes a little bit more than what was initially reported. Excuse me. And we were finding at least a handful of districts. We had this force that was pushing sort of this culture war agenda, I guess, in these school districts. And one of the requests that we had was to Central Bucks, because we already knew they were in there, but we wanted to know more about what was being said or what was being done at that time. And we got back an appeal, or excuse me, they denied our request on the grounds of attorney-client privilege. And by this time, we're getting pretty close to whenever our story was going live in April. So we laid out what we had there at the time, which was, we're appealing this denial. There are 17 emails that we know about that took place in November, and we just don't know exactly what was going on, but we'll come back to this later. So the story that ran this week is later.
It's like welcome to later.
Yes.
Right.
We finally got our emails, and they showed us a lot more than we were expecting. For one,
really?
Oh yeah. So I guess to really feel the weight of what we found, I think I need to back up to November of 2022. In the moment. So in November 2022, we're already now several months after the library policy, where there was a lot of concern that it would lead to widespread banning of LGBTQ plus related books or books on racism, anti-racism. One of the things that was said at the time was that, we have the policy, but we need to build the administrative regulations before it will be implemented. Therefore, the policy, while it's approved in July, not actually enforced yet. And things kind of hovered around there, that uncertainty, for a long time. And we get into we get into October. That's whenever the ACLU brings up its 72-page complaint filed on behalf of 7 students with the OCR. So now we've got this alleged toxic environment for LGBTQ students and staff and allies. And then we get to November 14th, was a Monday. We get notification from the district that at the following day's board meeting, we're going to hear a vote on hiring Dwayne Morris to represent the district during this OCR complaint and do their own internal investigation. The following day, after that vote, after Tuesday's vote, we move on to Wednesday. They voted 6-3 to hire Dwayne Morris. Most of their votes are 6-3. That's the split of the board.
That's how it works.
So we get to November 16th, that Wednesday. So Central Bucks has most of its policy committee meetings the day after a board meeting. So we get to our policy committee meeting, and on the agenda, there's an item for receipt of Title IX information. And what that turns out to be is a presentation by a Dr. Greg Brown of the University of Nebraska. Thing about his presentation is that, and I've transcribed the whole thing from the recording. Title IX is not mentioned by him anywhere in that. The only reference I can find is after his presentation, one of the board members referenced Title IX. But his whole presentation is about why, especially for girls teams, why trans athletes should not be playing on any team but the one of either their sex assigned at birth or a team of their own, the team of just trans athletes. So it kind of came out of the blue, because in my years of covering the district, I'd never really heard of anybody talking about an athletics bill. This was really just it was Fairness in Women's Sports bill at the state level, and that's really all we heard about it. So a couple weeks later, I get leaked this document of the administrative regulations, and as I'm looking up stuff on ILC, I find that there's a press release on the Pennsylvania Family Institute, which is like the parent organization, that is about the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, this hearing that was held last August, or the August before that, I mean, where Dr. Greg Brown was there.
The one, the only.
That's what they focused on. So my hypothesis was Dr. Brown was there because of the ILC. And that's what these emails show. that is what happened. On November 3rd, Jeremy Samick, the attorney with the ILC, had sent over the 109.2, the library regulation, administrative regulations, and then he sent the following couple of hours, maybe, sent another email that was it was a legal opinion, and it had to do with policy 321. That was at that time a policy that hadn't been passed yet, but that was the one that would restrict political symbols, as the district called them, which includes pride flags, and as the district would say, includes Trump flags as well, in any political discussion in classrooms. The day after that, November 4th, Michael Rinaldi from Duane Morris sends Dana Hunter, school board president Dana Hunter, an email that says, "I've touched base with Jeremy Samick. He has an expert to talk to you at the November 16th meeting." And that's where the ball starts rolling. We have, and keep in mind now, at the board, what we were told back in January, as far as ILC is concerned, is that at the board's suggestion, ILC was brought in to review the library regulations. They've already done that now. Mm-hmm. We get a few days of not much until, I think it was November 10th. We get sort of a whirlwind of emails coming through. One of them, Samick sends, he introduces Dr. Brown to Superintendent Lucabaugh and Dana Hunter officially. They have exchanged some pleasantries. After that, Samick sends over an agreement of services. Pro bono services. ILC always offers their services for free.
I wanted to make sure we hit on that point, because that's a really key aspect of all this, about why is it that this is so easy and why are they offering all this stuff? Great.
Mm-hmm. So, excuse me. So they send this agreement of services. Second paragraph of the agreement of services says that ILC will continue to offer more information, more advice on different policies, and will also work with outside counsel, quote, outside counsel, on the three OCR complaints, I think is what it was. And to me, that is striking, because keep in mind, we are now 4 days before the public is notified that there is going to be a vote to hire Duane Morris, but the agreement seems to imply that an outside counsel will take care of the complaint. The district has a solicitor of its own. It seems a bit odd to me, is all. So he sends over that agreement of services. Shortly after that, he also sends over a copy of the athletics policy that ILC developed with Hempfield School District, draft administrative regulations, and even a version that basically takes out anything for Hempfield and puts it for Central Bucks. So we are now 7 days out from whenever the first real introduction was made, the first contact, and going from starting with an introduction from library policies. Now the district has a new athletics policy, an expert to testify, as they put it, to its necessity, and possibly 2 law firms willing to defend its implementation. That's, to me, is manufacturing an issue within a district. It was done without any public involvement. And to me, what's even worse is that it continued to be done without public involvement. While we knew about Duane Morris, while that was revealed back in January, my question to the district was, what is the extent of ILC's involvement in Central Bucks? And the public statement that was released, not a reply to me, but a public statement that was released, said, we've brought them on to look at the library regulations. That might be in the strictest sense true, but that was not the extent of their relationship, and it was very clear by that point.
Well, and this is remarkable, because basically what you just laid out there, and this is why this reporting is so critical. What you just laid out there is like, look, you could have a school board that might have really extreme positions on something, right? And so they have to go, but then if it's just a local school board, then they would have to work out all the logistics of everything that you just described and figure out how you would actually enact this kind of stuff, which would take months, right? If not years, right? In this case, you have the introduction of the ILC, right? And then you have, oh, by the way, within a very short period of time, here's the entire infrastructure that you'll need, all prepackaged and ready-made to move that forward.
Yeah.
Right. And it just so happens that it's not going to cost you very much either. How about that?
Yeah. And I think the thing that I think is really important to emphasize here, and sort of also to the point that Joe Gaeta, I hope I pronounced that right, from Democracy Forward discussed as we went into Central York. The issue here is not so much that they got advice from a certain organization.
Because let's be clear, that's perfectly fine,
Yes.
perfectly legal for any school board to do.
Yes, that is fine. The problem comes in, one, the transparency. That's probably more paramount than anything. But also from other conversations I've had with some legal experts, the issue comes down to who is liable, who becomes responsible for steps that the district takes. If the district has a solicitor and it listens to another attorney, then I think the public has a right to ask, well, why are you not listening to the solicitor that we have? And
right.
why are you taking this advice? Why did we develop a policy from this other law firm? There's just so many transparency questions that come up that.
Well, and let's be clear about that. Yeah, let's be clear about the transparency thing too as well, because it's not simply like transparency as a moral question, right? But it's also, you're talking about school boards who are like in a fiduciary relationship with taxpayers and district members, right? So it's not as if they're like a private corporation that, is just not being transparent, but they're an actual organization which is charged to oversee part of, say, a public infrastructure, in this case, school boards, right? So that becomes like, that becomes both a legal question and also a question of a misuse or like you said, a shadowy use at the very least of the district money and resources, right? And I that's the part that I kind of found fascinating, both what happens in Central Bucks, but then also what happens in York, is because there's also these pockets of who's in the know and who's not in the know, right?
Yeah, and in Central York, that was especially interesting. Democracy Forward, they had heard some concerns. I believe it was at least partially based on our reporting. And the parents out there, at least that Democracy Forward was aware of, they weren't expecting to actually find anything, really. I mean, because there's nothing public about it, and I guess for whatever reason they didn't expect it. And the relationship between the superintendent, Peter Aiken, and Jeremy Samick, they've known each other since grade school, apparently. That was unknown. The fact that Aiken had gotten some advice from ILC was unknown, but also what's so striking to me is that this is also the first instance where we don't seem to have a school board involved at this point, which, at the end of the day, that could actually be pretty good for the district. That the school board member, the elected officials weren't involved in anything, but at this, the other end, it just goes back to, okay, well, how much of the administrative side was influenced by ILC then? And, and I think, as Gaeta pointed out in our story here, the issue is, it comes up to what happens if you pass a policy that gets the school district sued.
Right.
That's your response. You have to explain that to taxpayers. And if you could have months ago said, we're looking at this advice from this group, and another attorney or the public had chimed in and said, are you crazy? Don't do that. And then you say, oh, okay, never mind, we're not going to do that then. You've lost that opportunity to have the public weigh in that could avert that potential issue. It's just, it's frustrating for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, no, and I think it's just fascinating. I mean, kind of like you said, I mean, look, there might be serious and deep, like, say, political, social, moral reasons of not having advice from a particular law firm. But there's no reason, if you want to bring the ILC forward, right? Okay, bring it to the public, bring it to a meeting, say, hey, this is someone, they've offered their, services free of charge to all of us. We want to bring it toward you to let you know we're going to bring them in. By the way, here's the materials about these people's background. Here's who the firm is so that you can review it. And then we can talk about that at the next board meeting, because you've had ample time to discuss this, about whether or not we should bring this forward, and we'll be voting it at that time. I mean, that would be like the proper procedure, right?
Yeah.
Of being able to have the publicly informed about it, having the time to consider it before a decision is made.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I was thinking about earlier today that kind of highlights the issue here is that, like, for instance, and whenever I was a municipal government reporter in Warrington Township a few years back, Aqua PA, private utility, wanted to buy the water system. There was this huge water contamination issue, not just in Warrington, but other communities. So Aqua PA went to the township and said, here's an offer. And what the township did was, we're going to take that, and now we're going to hold public meetings for like the next 8 months. And we're going to discuss this. And one of the things that I believe was chairman at the time, Fred Gaines, said was, we don't have to do any of this. Like, this is us letting the public know exactly what's going on. That's why it took 8 months. They had numerous public meetings. They entertained other offers, all of this stuff. At any point, any of these districts that we've talked about, even in the individual board members, at any point in time, at any of these public meetings, have a chance to just simply say, oh, by the way, I talked to this group about this.
Yep.
Nobody did it. I saw a question in the chat about if the school district or board member commented, and I guess I just want to respond.
I was just about to ask you about this. Yeah, go ahead.
Every meeting is an opportunity to comment, and they often don't. Sometimes
they often don't. Yeah. So let me ask you this too, Jordan too as well, who wrote that question in chat too as well. She also had a question about, you have any idea about why Central Bucks School District has taken down the record of who has submitted right to know information?
I have theories. I have opinions. But I will say I don't think I should venture into that land.
Fair enough.
I have not talked to the district about that.
Mm-hmm.
It is as much a mystery as it is to me as everybody else. But
well, it's just interesting because we had a similar issue kind of in Penridge, and only to find out that the requests are coming from like a couple people,
yeah,
and some of them happen to be sitting on that board. So it's like one of those kind of things. But I think that's where the question is coming from, certainly.
Yeah.
So before I move, we kind of move on, because I want to highlight a couple things, but before we kind of move on, is there kind of other aspects of this kind of story that you have out there that you think we haven't covered yet? Because I just think this is such an important move, and like I have to say this too as well, as just kind of like commentary on the reporting that you're doing. To see this unfold over time like this, I think is really important for the community as a whole. Because it's like, okay, we get an idea we get introduced to who these players are, who this ILC organization is, and some of the work that we're doing. But then to see the kind of like deeper levels of involvement and some of the ways in which this happened is so important, because I think that, I think we talked about this a bit before when you were on the show the last time, is that, I think most community members and parents were really taken off guard, right? And had to fight really hard to get up to speed on who these players are, what is happening, and why it's happening. And why it's happening so quickly, and this is why I want to really emphasize that aspect of that you just talked about this ready-made infrastructure ready to go on this, because there's just not a whole lot of time to respond in the community if these policies are already backed by the machinery to get them passed in a quick fashion.
Yeah, I think that's, like I said, I think the transparency issue is paramount here, but also in that similar vein here, and to what Democracy Forward is also kind of focused on, because in Central York, we don't know the specific policies. We just know that these conversations took place from their sworn affidavits. I know that Title IX came up, and my experience with ILC, if Title IX comes up, it's probably about locker rooms or it's about athletics policies, but I don't know for certain. But the thing that is so important about what Democracy Forward did whenever they gave us these documents is that they allowed us to peek behind the curtain before a major policy shift. In every other instance that we have, like with the Eastern Lancaster County, we actually kind of lucked out. Our records request was a period between January 1st, 2021 through whenever we put the request in. But the only reason we got what we got was because one of the attorneys with ILC had to forward over emails that were sent, I think, in 2020 or 2019, again in 2021. So we had those email chains and we got more information that way. We lucked out there. But, there's this huge gap of time often before we know what's going to happen, or what between whenever we know that ILC was involved to whenever they actually began getting involved. And in Central York, it's at least a little bit closer. And I think that the reason why I focus on that is because I think that tells me something about the response to this, is that people do care about this, and they want to keep an eye on their districts. And I think that sort of what I hope to be sort of the next influence of this story, or these stories, is at least to get to a place where if a school district thinks they're going to work behind the scenes with a group like this, they should say, well, somebody's going to find out. So let's be upfront about this right now. Let's not get into that whole issue.
Right. Well, here's a fascinating thing. And Darren just made this comment here to his parent in Penridge, asked you at the board meeting, at the last school board meeting. Somebody asked them, hey, look, have you ever worked with the ILC? Right. This is right before your piece dropped. And the chair responded, no comment. Right. Mm-hmm. And I find that fascinating for exactly what you just laid out there. Because if we know who these players are and we know to ask those questions now to a school board, right, they have to make a decision, right? Those members of the school board have to make a decision on that moment, right? Mm-hmm. If they say, no, we haven't, and they had, that's a lie, right? And they can't do that. Or they could say, yes, we have, and then it's, chaos ensues because why haven't we known about this before, right? Or you have this kind of no comment, which again, we don't know what that means exactly. For all we know, this guy has no idea what the hell the ILC is. And so he's like, I'll just not comment on it. The guy hasn't said very much at any school board meeting. So that could be it. But I mean, there's a choice that has to be made now in terms of that pressure back from the community to ask the right questions of the school board, which seems to be like the value of, seeing this reporting unfold.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the interesting thing about that, I saw that meeting where that question was asked. And the thing about it is that at the time that question was asked, I had also already sent out an email asking that question to every board member. And only one responded. It wasn't the one that was asked that question. And I don't know because I don't have it right in front of me at the moment, but I do believe that if you check out our previous story on the section on Penridge, and in the documents that we embed there, I'm pretty sure that the name of the person who was asked that question was included in one of those emails. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Darren's like saying, yeah, this is after the CBD or the Central Bucks article, but before the article involving Penridge, and then you had the reporting on it. Yeah, I exactly remember that. One other question. This is coming from Jordan again too, as well as this has been an increasing, people have been paying attention to in the school boards too, as well. And of course, we've got this Moms for Liberty summit coming up in Philadelphia at the end of the week. And the question was if you've seen any of the kind of intersection or those connections between the ILC or the Moms for Liberty showing up in these documents as well.
Whew.
I mean, look, like I'm not. Well, I'm just answer the question.
This is the most difficult thing, and I've talked about this extensively with Democracy Forward and with several other organizations as I've been researching, even beyond this, of other projects I'm working on. The problem is that it is hard to link any one organization with the other. Now, as far as Moms for Liberty specifically, there is a direct link between PA Family, the PA Family Institute, and Moms for Liberty. One of the board members on their website is a chapter head of the Dauphin County Moms for Liberty, and it seems like the safest way to go is that there are so many overlapping interests that if they are not working in tandem as a matter of practice or policy, they're traveling down the same roads,
right.
and they're going to get to the same destination together, I think. But it is difficult. I know that even the ILC and Pennsylvania Family Institute take issue with being tied to the Family Research Council, despite there's been references that PA Family has made to the Family Research Council as its sister organization. There's been money exchanging hands between the national group to the state group, and they share so many of the key principles of traditional family values, and fairness in women's sports, all of these things, locker rooms. It's one of those things where it's I think that in the strictest sense, PA Family might not be a chapter of the Family Research Council, but they are affiliated at the very least.
Yeah, I remember, we always used to say, I used to live in DC, and there's all, especially as an adjunct instructor at the time, right? So you always looked around for where the good places were to go for free food for happy hours, right? And one of the things that, we'd come away from some of these, kind of events going on is that you begin to notice over time is like, look, there's this organization and this organization and this organization, and they're all after the same thing. There's nothing on paper that says this is directly linking them to here, but guess what? They're all at the same cocktail parties, right? And whether we're talking figuratively or kind of, in practice, that's another thing. But they're definitely, I love the way you put it. They're going down the same path, and they're doing it together. Whether or not they actually are, taking the time to sign each other's autographs, that's a different story. But
yeah, they might not be in the same car, but
yeah, right, exactly. They're on the same road and they're going the same destination. Well, good. It's like, so if we're looking at it at this point, then, if you had to pull out, we've kind of gone over this, I think touched upon this already, but if there's some aspects of this reporting that you think are in particular important for the community to pay attention to, what are some of those things that you might pull out? And then we could talk a little bit about where this goes from here.
Well, I think I think I've covered just about all of it now. I'm trying to think back there. I think really the community's response, especially in Central Bucks, I think the community is already very engaged with everything.
Yeah.
So I don't think I think they'll be. I'll say this. At this point, I think it's on the readers to tell us what they're getting from it and what they need to know more about, I think.
It's a great way to put it. Well, this, I have to say, this also doesn't seem like this is a story that is over. No. That we're heading into obviously we have municipal and school board elections coming up in this fall. So again, I'm not asking you to kind of I don't know, spoil a scoop or something like that. But, are there areas and kind of directions that you're focused on now that you kind of see that you're going to be tracking in the upcoming stories?
Well, there are, of course, there are a couple of things that are too early to get into right now. Mm-hmm. But I can say that as of today, as of last week, I should say, we are currently fighting an appeal in Pencrest School District. Situation out there. Whenever we requested the ILC emails, what happened was they they gave us back these 2 emails. One of the documents, in one of the board members, David Valesky, said basically, I've been talking to this organization for a while. They've forwarded me a bunch of stuff. Maybe they could help us while we're out of solicitor. And to that, we responded to the district saying, hey, it sounds like this board member has other emails. Why didn't we get that? And the district responded by saying, you have everything we have. And so we went back again and said, okay. But did you ask them to search their personal email addresses for, everything? And they responded again, we gave you everything we have. So we fought that in the Office of Open Records. We won that appeal. And now the school district is taking us to court in the Crawford County Court of Common Pleas. And that is just beginning right now. So eventually we will have more to report out of Pencrest, I think. It's hard to say exactly how long that'll take. I am, as of right now, and I hope to have this done pretty close to after the Moms for Liberty Summit, but I am working on a story about the growing counter movement to Moms for Liberty. After a couple of months of trying to get somebody from Moms for Liberty, because I was really fascinated I wanted to know more about how these moms joined the group, beyond just the summary of everybody was enraged by the pandemic. I want to know who they were before that, but we just, we couldn't organize any interviews. We just couldn't get there. And so as I was doing that, I started to talk to more people from groups like Stop Moms for Liberty across the state, a few people that are from the Central Bucks area that we know well. And I heard this common theme, which actually kind of mirrored Moms for Liberty people who I've heard in public meetings, where they basically, the story was, I used to not pay attention to the school board meetings until I heard about this thing. And now I've got to go every school board meeting because I'm blown away by all of this. And now I'm involved. And very similar fashion to Moms for Liberty. That's kind of how they started. But there's this now growing counter movement of national groups splitting off into state chapters. And one of the things I'm going to explore in that story, not to give everything away, but one of the things I find most fascinating is that Moms for Liberty is a group that, while somewhat ironically saying we don't co-parent with the government, is focused on shaping policy, getting board members in to become the government so that they can protect their children. Whereas the counter movement is, if Moms for Liberty is at the dais of the school board meeting, then the counter movement's at the door. And they're getting people as they come in saying, hey, this is what's happening. And that's kind of this push and pull that I find really, really fascinating between these two movements. But we'll have more on that hopefully sometime next week.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that so much. Well, Chris, I'll just leave it to, let's see, who read it? Who said this right here? I'll leave us with this one. Darren basically says, Ullery deserves an award for his journalism on the ILC 100%. So I think that's just a little bit of a sense of what your reporting has meant to the community. So I really appreciate, again, you taking time out of your really busy schedule to be here. But most importantly, for the work that you're doing with Bethany Rogers too, as well as helping all of us kind of understand what's happening in our communities and what's happening in our school board. So I appreciate your work and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And of course, the best way to support us is to get a subscription. We have, York Daily Record, Philly Burbs, Go Erie, Times Online, what is about 13 papers on the USA Today network. Subscribe so we can keep doing this work.
I can't tell you. Look, and that might be a physical subscription. That could be a digital subscription. It's really important. I've had this discussion with so many folks that are working in journalism, whether it's someone like me who's kind of like dependent upon journalism, right, to help kind of move this stuff. Other folks in the community that are doing this. It is the local papers that have been so decimated over the last several decades that you know, we've got to really solve this problem, because we lose the journalists, we lose their papers, then we lose access to the kind of critical information in our democracy. So I'm glad you ended with that one. So it's a perfect way to close it out. Fantastic. Well, Chris, remember, you can also kind of follow Chris on Twitter. Just make sure you check him out at Ullery at Intel. That's ULLERY at ATINTELL. You can find that directly in tonight's show notes too as well. You can click on it and follow all the reporting, and yeah, get that subscription in there and help support kind of our local papers that are kind of helping all of us understand what's happening in our communities. Thanks so much, Chris. And man, we're looking forward to that next report for next week. So take care.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. Woo, that was a good one. That was a good one. As we know, this is the kind of thing that is being absolutely decimating our community. But as Chris left us on a fairly hopeful note, there's organizing coming back. So let's keep up the work. See ya!